Hello, Amy.
Hi, Raul. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Good, thanks.
Are you excited?
Very incredibly excited. Yeah.
Finally, we are here with our experts waiting in the backstage, right?
Yes, very excited.
Do you have
Ready
your
to get
coffee?
started. Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So let's invite them. Here we have Anne Fitz, Julie, and Renee. Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Hi. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, everyone.
Good morning. Let's see if we see some messages coming from YouTube. If our audience is already awake too. Yeah, well, actually here it's 6 p.m. in Spain.
Oh man, I'd be asleep by now.
Yeah, it's
You start at
starting.
4, don't you, Renee?
Oh yeah, I'm an early bird. Out early too.
Oh, we've got someone tuning in from Germany too, so you're not the only one staying up late, Raul.
Yeah. Hello, Dennis, Curtis, Noah. How are you? Yeah, so guys, we have like half an hour more or less, right, to try to cover as many of the updates you released a few weeks ago. So if you are okay with that, Amy and I will leave you here showing your magic. Is that okay?
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Hey.
Okay. Who want to start? So we share his screen or her screen.
And Anne's kicking it off.
All right,
Okay.
I'll kick it off.
Perfect.
So awesome. We had a lot of really exciting stuff come out in 4.23. We released version 4.23 just a couple of weeks ago, right after the Dev Summit. And the first thing I want to talk to you guys about with version 4.23 was my favorite thing in the release, the FlowRenderer. So the FlowRenderer brings a new way for visualizing magnitude and direction in your imagery layers. Oh, and I forgot, we didn't even introduce ourselves yet. So before I talk about the FlowRenderer, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Anne. I'm a product engineer on the ArcGIS API for JavaScript, and I work on a lot of different things in the API, including symbology, visualization, widgets, arcade, and yeah, I'll hand it off to Julie to introduce.
Well, I think we need a fun fact, Anne. A fun Anne fact.
Fun fact. Wow, really put on the spot. I like to go backpacking and camping.
That's good.
No, it's not that fun,
so I'm Julie, and I'm product manager for our JavaScript API, and I also work on Calcite, our design system. And now I feel like I'm not fun because I can't think of a fun fact either. My kids are sick. That's fun. I bet Renee has something better. Go ahead, Renee.
No, I'm Renee. I work on JavaScript API and help people build apps and stuff and do a lot of different content and everything. And I mean, fun fact, I probably drink too much coffee, but it's okay.
Don't we all? All right. Now I could talk about the FlowRenderer, which I'm excited about. So I'm not sure how many of you tuned in at Dev Summit, but we had this fun demo that got lots of reactions. So this is showing the old way of doing it with using the vector field renderer. So this is using arrows to show magnitude and direction from an imagery layer. And the new way of doing it is using the FlowRenderer, which takes animated streamlines to visualize the magnitude and direction of the vector of the raster data. So we actually introduced this in version 4.22. It was called the animated flow renderer back then, but 4.23 brings this new renderer out of beta. It is only supported in 2D map views at this time. And we added support for visual variables. So that's why you can see the light green areas showing areas of higher magnitude and the blue showing areas of lower magnitude. And here's another example. In addition to color visual variables, you can also apply opacity and size. So let me just uncomment that and refresh the app. And my computer is not responding well to being live streamed, I guess. Oh, and I'm missing a comma, so that could also impact it. There we go. So now you can see that the magnitude is also using a size visual variable, an opacity visual variable. So we can really see Hurricane Ida clearly here. Another enhancement with the FlowRenderer is that you can use it with the time slider widget. So now I'm just going to uncomment this, and hopefully I'm not missing any commas this time. And we'll refresh. And now we can animate this data by each different time slice. So we can see how Hurricane Ida moves each hour throughout the day. So yeah, that's what I have on FlowRenderer. Julie, maybe I'll pass it off to you.
One question we have, sorry for interrupting. Austin is asking if the FlowRenderer is supported on the scene view.
Yes, I answered that already. It is just supported in 2D map views.
Okay, sorry.
At this time, but maybe in the future we'll add support in the scene view as well. Thank you. Julie?
Okay. So I'm going to cover a couple highlights, starting off with our Basemap capability. Now you can actually switch between spatial references. So that could be as simple as just setting the spatial reference on the view, or you can have a collection of different basemaps with different spatial references within your basemap picker, and it will just switch between those between those spatial references, which is pretty handy. So that goes for the basemap gallery, and then also the toggle, the basemap toggle. So that's something that has been highly requested by a lot of different customers. Okay, so switching gears to some 3D updates. You might have used the Heatmap in 2D. We now have a Heatmap in 3D as well. So this is a pretty beautiful view of a 3D scene. In this particular example, we're looking at some traffic incidents, and it's an integrated mesh that you're seeing with the heat map draped on it. So you can see here, it's basically defining this, this incident layer on a feature layer, and that's where the heat map is basically defined on, and then that's draped over the integrated mesh. You can also drape it right on the terrain. So if you don't have the integrated mesh displayed, you can drape it on the terrain. In the future, we're looking at potentially also supporting the heat map draped directly on the 3D objects as well. But so right now we're supporting the integrated mesh and then also directly on the terrain. You can also do things like set the static reference scale. So for example, if I want to zoom in and I don't want the blur to change as I zoom in, you can basically have that fixed regardless of the scale of the map. That's something that is only supported for 3D at this time. We're evaluating whether we'll be adding it to 2D as well. So as you see, I zoom in and out, the blur radius is changing there.
Hey, Julie, we've got a question in the chat. Is that going to reproject all the data in the map?
It's not reprojecting. Oh, they must be talking about the basemap one. So the basemap one, yes. Basically, when you change the spatial reference of the view, it's going to actually ask the server to reproject the data. This is something that actually was a common confusion with this update. One thing that we're not doing, we're not actually reprojecting the basemap on the client. We're simply displaying it correctly in the spatial reference of the basemap. So if there's any confusion in terms of like reprojecting basemaps, that's not what's happening. We're just allowing you to switch between the different basemaps with different spatial references. But if you have any operational data that you're displaying on top of this basemap, it can be reprojected and displayed on top of with that spatial reference. Okay, so going to this one, this is one of my favorites. We introduced weather. So one of the things that we work on in 3D is to try and give you the ability to create more realistic scenes. And having different weather display is kind of helping in that area. So displaying clouds, and you can display how much you want, like what the cloud thickness of the cloud cover should be. Maybe you want some fog. We're in San Francisco. So this is something we introduced previously. And in this last release, we added the weather widget. Something kind of cool is you set up the clouds or whatever weather you want, and it interacts with the time of day. So like as you get to nighttime, into twilight, you see that weather displayed at that time of day. So that's kind of cool. And in the future, we have some cool plans for also displaying things like actual rain falling. So keep an eye out for that cool weather. The next one is line styles and text decorations as well. So the different ways you can style your lines and 3D scenes, and how you can style your labels. So this is basically giving the styling capabilities for these lines and labels to be at parity with 2D. So you can use like the dashed lines. Here you can see I've got arrows at the line ends. So you can kind of compare that like a 2D map view. You'll have all that same capability for the different line styles and text decorations. This is using like the long dash style, and you can see the arrow markers support as well. Now, something you might notice in this particular example, that basically as I turn the globe, it's like there's a flashlight displayed. Like I can always see whatever view I'm looking at from the camera, it's all lit up. And that's because of another new capability we added, which is the virtual light. So in this example, it's a conceptual example. I'm not trying to see actual, virtual sunlight. So it'd be nice to basically always have that virtual light displayed, which is a great feature that we've added. So when you look at an example like this, this is a exaggerated terrain sample that we've had for a while. So here we're basically just setting the lighting to virtual. If I didn't have that, and I take that away and we refresh it, when I go to areas like the poles, it's really, really apparent. So you see basically that virtual sunlight there. And that's helpful in some scenarios when you want it to be realistic, but in some like more conceptual spaces, you might want it all to be lit up like the example that I previously showed.
There's another question in the chat. It's asking, can you connect the time of day with something else that may be keeping track of time? And I believe the answer is yes. There's a property on Scene View Environment that allows you to set the date and time. So you could pull that in from wherever you're getting your date and time. You don't have to use the daylight widget.
Yeah. Okay, so then kind of breezing through another 3D update. So this is something called analysis objects. And what's cool about analysis objects is if you've used the API in the past and used various widgets to do measurement or line of sight, maybe you're slicing a building, we have these great widgets to let you interact with these measurement or these analysis capabilities. But there's some scenarios where you might want to just programmatically define a measurement or some sort of analysis and then just display it on the map. So that's what analysis objects allow you to do. Basically, programmatically access these different analysis capabilities, line of sight, slice, and measurement, whether it's area or line measurement, and then display it in your map. You can also use that to set the initial state of a widget. So this particular example basically sets the initial state, but then you can say like, oh, well, I want to allow the user to continue interacting, and I can go ahead and continue using that widget. What this is going to set us up to do in the future is, basically save these analysis objects to your web scene. So maybe you want to go to like different slides in a presentation and show different measurements or line of sight. As you switch between the different slides, you could actually have those saved as part of your web scene. So that's something that we're looking at for the future. And at this moment, you basically can access all the programmatic access to the analysis and set that initial state. And that's kind of the initial phase of this analysis capability. Okay, so that's the bigger 3D highlights I wanted to cover. Now I wanted to switch gears and talk about editing. Man, if you guys have been with us, for the last several years, editing is like a really ongoing incremental project where we start with, the most basic editing, and then, little by little add more editing capabilities to the API and more aspects to the workflow, and hopefully continuous improving, the end user's productivity and how you can configure the experience for your end users. And so in the latest release, we revamped the editing experience. So you used to have this initial dialogue where you're deciding whether you're updating or creating features. Now it's all in this one dialogue. So I can go in and basically decide if I want to create or update right away. I can search for like what type of feature I want to add. So maybe I want to add like a full closure road. And so I've added that. The other thing that's part of this update is I can add multiple features at once. So rather than going back and forth and adding it one by one, I can add multiple features and then set the attributes for those features and then create them. You might also notice here that the snapping UI is all part of the editing widget. So I can say whether I want snapping to be enabled, and do I want that to be both the geometry guide. So like that kind of helps me do, like if I want a right angle, for example, or perpendicular, it shows those like within feature creation, showing those guides, and then the feature to feature snapping. And then also what layers I want it to snap to. So maybe there's only one layer that I want to be able to snap to as I'm doing the editing. I can set that up. So since that's turned on, as I get closer to that line, I can snap it, and snapping will be enabled for that feature. I think that's what I wanted to enable for. Oh, I wanted to show one more. One thing that I find really impressive, and this isn't an update, but just to kind of reiterate about editing is, to have like and sorry for all this craziness, this is one of our SDK samples, to enable just the most basic workflow with editing. This is all the code you need to enable editing. What this thing is doing is going into your map, it finds out what feature layers are editable, it finds all of the feature templates, knowing like what the symbology is, what the different attributes are. So it basically goes and configures this entire editing widget by inspecting the layers in your map. So if you just wanted the most basic out-of-box workflow, really this is all you need to do to set that up. Now then you have the options to do a lot more configuration of setting up the experience of what attributes you want to be displayed or how you want to display and all that. And Anne's going to talk a little bit more about some of the new smarts that we've added to the editing experience in that area. So I think with that, I'll hand it to Anne if you want to cover that, Anne.
Yep.
Oh, real quick, sorry, Anne. Real quick, there was a question on how to display 3D raster surfaces in Scene Viewer. I'm not sure I quite get the question. I'm assuming other than publishing from Pro, but if that's not the answer you're looking for, go to the Esri community. You can ask there and get a better answer there. Not a 3D expert. My default answer is published from Pro, but maybe you're looking for something else. So, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Anne.
Thanks. Okay, so Julie talked a little bit about the editing enhancements. I'm going to continue talking about editing enhancements in the FeatureForm. So this is actually showing in the map viewer where we're using the editor widget with the FeatureForm. And an exciting new feature here is that you can use Arcade to calculate form values. So for instance, let's say I'm adding a proposed dike wall. So I'm going to add my feature. And now I can decide what I want the finished height to be. So let's say 5 feet or something. Now it's going to calculate immediately. As soon as I type that, it calculates the amount of sandbags needed and all of the material needed for this dike wall. And if I update say change the number, then all of a sudden it gets recalculated again. And then I can create my feature and those values will stay with it. We also added support for contingent values. So if I add let's say we want to add the Dodger Stadium's not added here. So let's say I'm adding a new MLB, I think it's somewhere right around here. And now we can say, I don't really know baseball very well, so this doesn't really work for a great example, but I believe the Dodgers are in the West. So I can go through, and you can see as I go through, it's giving me these recommended values based on the foreign values that are selected. So now I can select Dodgers and create my, I don't know, what's it called? The Dodger Stadium. I don't think I think it's just called Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
I don't think it has a fancy name. So now I can create that feature. So yeah, that's contingent values. And I believe now I'm going to hand it off to someone else.
That'd be me.
Talk about. Oh, yep, Renee's turn.
All right. So one of the things I want to talk about is reactiveUtils, which we've added in this release. And what's cool about this is that its core, the JavaScript API, is a reactive library, right? We've always had the ability for you to do property watching and to act on those properties. This way you don't have to listen for events everywhere. You don't have to rely on us to add events for something in particular that you're interested in. You just watch for those particular properties to change. Now, up until now, we've had a watchUtils module that you could use. The only issue with using like watchUtils is that we have to define like a watch for everything you want to do, like when defined, when false, and when truthy, or whatever, stuff like that. But now you can go ahead and use reactiveUtils to make it much more flexible. So we have a really cool sample in the SDK for reactiveUtils here. And actually, let me go straight to the code here to kind of show you some of the cool stuff you can do. So in this example here, right, we're going to use reactiveUtils to watch for pop-up visible. And this would, this is like a really basic kind of thing you might want to do. You're just going to watch for one particular property to change. But the other cool thing you can do is you can actually watch for an entire array of properties to change, right? So on collections we have in the API, you can listen for events. So when an event, when an item is added to a collection or removed, you can go ahead and do something with that. But now you can go ahead and just use reactiveUtils and watch for any value inside that array to change. So I'm interested in knowing when the views stationary, extent, and scale change, any of those three. And when they do, I'm going to go ahead and do something. So in this case here, I'm going to get the new values. I'm going to pull the old value for the original stationary and then do something with it. So as I'm interacting with this map, you can see here that I'm updating certain properties over here in the sidebar. There's even a piece down here for the visible layers, which I think I broke because I was messing around with this particular sample earlier. But yeah, you can see the extent's updated, the scale gets updated, and everything else like that. So this is much more flexible for me to be able to do some pretty cool things. You can look through the doc. We actually have a few different methods in reactiveUtils. We have once. No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Watch is probably the one most people are going to end up using. As I said, you can use that to watch particular arrays and stuff like that. There's also when, which is when the initial value is a truthy value, some sort of Boolean that you're interested in doing. And then we have when once as well. And there's also particular options you can send. So if you want it to behave like the init in watchUtils, you can do that. And there's a lot in here. So keep an eye on this. We're going to update this documentation for the next release as well. But we have a really great sample there that you can check out. And I think it's something that people are really going to be interested in using down the line. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be the RouteLayer. So RouteLayer is really neat. So if you've ever done anything with routing in the API, you get back the what you do is you provide stops for your route. And you
Wait,
say,
Renee, really quick, before you get into the RouteLayer, there's a couple things in the chat. Sorry for interrupting. First, the instant apps question, when will instant apps be moved to 4x? Some of them, I believe, are already on 4x. So not sure. I think the editing updates should be available already, but I would have to double check on that. And then
Yeah,
we're sorry.
correct.
Yeah. And then we're sorry about the text being blurry in the code window. It might be something to do with the network. So sorry about that.
Yeah, I tried to make it a little bigger here. I'm not sure if that's going to help or not. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, back to you with the RouteLayer. Sorry, Renee.
All right, no worries. So when you use route, like we have a way to ask for routes in the API natively. You provide you want to go from stop A to stop B, and you get that result back. But you can also have directions in that result. You've got some other data for barriers and whatnot. And we have a layer now that handles all that for you, right? So in the future, this is going to be integrated with the directions widget. So you can create them and save them from the widget itself. But we have a really cool sample that shows kind of how this works now. So if I go to, I'm just going to give my sample here. Sorry, I thought I had this up. Okay, so here's my sample for the route layer. Actually, let me go right into the sandbox because I think it's going to be easier to see. So if I want to actually get a layer directly, so I don't have to use the route and there we go. So if I do the route, I get the results back, and it's up to me to go ahead and display those results in the map. I got to place the stops in the map. I got to place the actual route in the map based on the results I get back from doing my route. Now you can just go ahead and do it with the route layer. So I create my 2 stops, which is what I would use to do the route anyway. I have some point barriers in here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and create my route layer. Once I do that, add it to the map, and it's going to take care of the rest of the work for me. It's going to get the directions and everything else, right? So that's pretty neat. That's really cool. And like I said, we're going to be adding stuff to this later so it works with directions widget and just kind of, as a better experience for you as a developer. But I think this is really something that's cool in the API, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for people to use. So now we'll go and pass it back to Anne.
Yeah. Unless Julie, did you want to show something about the
time?
I'll talk about
finish, and then I wanted to I guess expand on that question about time.
Okay.
So I can show some demos. So go ahead.
I'll be quick. So every release, we include some updates on widgets. We've improved the graphic highlighting for Sketch. So before it was just this little dot, and now we highlight the whole symbol. And another area, there were a lot of big enhancements, was the feature table widget. So now you can add sort priority to your feature table. So if you, all you have to do is select multi-sort enabled to true. And then on your field configs, you can set the initial priority. So I'm setting this initial priority to 0. So this will be this one will be sorted first. So it's going based on forest name, and then it's sorting based on the recreation area name. So this just kind of helps us organize our feature table a little bit better. The other things that were added to feature table were if I select a couple things in the table, now we have these options that pop up. So zoom to selection, show selected records, and clear selection. So this will zoom to selection. If I click show selected records, it only shows the selected records in the table. And then I can also clear selection. That's feature table, short and sweet. All right, Julie?
Okay, so let me go back and share my screen. Okay, so I'm not sure if we fully answered that question that someone had about time. In terms of what the daylight widget is doing, this is actually setting the time of day and the time of year for the scene, for the environment settings. And it's actually pretty cool because it's actually, really setting that realistic time for that exact time of day, for that time of year. And it also calculates the shadows. So you can, see the shadows, what they would be on that day and that time. So that's kind of one aspect that we work with time. But the other one, in case that the person was asking wasn't aware of it, there's also the time slider widget. And this is another way, like say you have your data. So it's not just setting the environment. This is like you have data that's time enabled and you want to visualize that over time. So if you have like date and time information in your layer, you can visualize that over time. And one way to do it is using the time slider. So this is basically setting the time window that you want to display in this case, filter the data based on the time. And what this is doing behind the scenes is really setting the views, the time info on the view, so it knows what to display for that time. This is looking at dates, but we have this other one that I really love and I show all the time, showing a smoke forecast, and you can see like this is actually scrolling through the actual time within that day. So there is quite a bit that you can do with time if you're interested in working with your data that has some time aspect to it. And yeah, and just to reiterate that other question about instant apps, they are using 4X. There may not be a template that's using editing, and that might be the question that the person was wondering is, is there an editing template that uses 4X? I think there is, but I'll need to follow up and see what exact template is our app is using editing. So you can see that new experience in there. So yeah, that's all I had to add.
So I got one thing I wanted to cover real quick before we finish up here, and that is we've been removing the task from the API for the fast few releases. We had deprecation since like 4.19. So I just want to let people know that by the time 4.24 comes around, all of those task classes will be gone. And we have a blog post up right now on the Esri blogs discussing this. So if you've been using any of these old task classes, please refactor, migrate out of them because we are going to be removing them completely in 4.24. And the blog post discusses some of the ways you can migrate and some patterns and stuff to use all the new REST methods to handle that for you. There's also some helper methods on the portal module that we'll be removing as well. So please go read that post and please update your apps. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think we had one final question about the scene view editor, adding tilt and roll to the built-in controls for the scene view editor. I don't know the answer to that, but we can follow up with you. Are you asking about the scene viewer? Just let us know in the chat and we can follow up later. Other than that, I think we are out of time. So thank you all for tuning in. We have a lot more in the release that we didn't cover. So we can send the links for the release notes and the release blog so you can read up all about it. Yeah, and let us know what you guys thought about this live stream. It's our first time doing it. So let us know what you think if we should keep doing this in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much, folks, for all the time you share with us, letting us know what we have new. It's amazing, all the things you do in every 4 months. I don't know what we can expect for the next release. It's always exciting and challenging to stay up to date. So I really appreciate your time sharing all this with all the attendees. And I also want to apologize for the kind of the delay, because we are sharing things, but we are getting the responses with a little bit of the delay. That's why it's taking a little bit longer for us to get back to you. But yeah, that's everything I want to say. Anything else you want to say before we leave and go back to our daily lives?
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great one. Bye.